You are listening to Mining Stock Education, where you'll learn from the top leaders in the natural resource sector and uncover quality mining investment opportunities.
Thank you for tuning in to Mining Stock Education. I'm Bill Powers, and today's show will be focused on Idaho as a mining jurisdiction. While at the Vancouver Resource Investment Conference last week, I attended a breakfast seminar entitled Focus on Gold in Idaho, and one of the speakers at that breakfast seminar was Mr. Ben Davenport. He was and is the Executive Vice President of the Idaho Mining Association. After the breakfast concluded, I interviewed Ben, and this is the interview that I will share with you today on today's show. But first, this show is brought to you today by Idaho gold developer and explorer Otis Gold Corp. Ticker is OOO in Toronto. Now, there had been a legal dispute with the U.S. Forest Service over the issuance of one of Otis's exploration permit at the company's Kilgore project, where there was already a 1 million ounce resource. The judge just recently settled that dispute in Otis's favor, and now the company is planning a big drill program this year to expand the resource and advance this project. I'm going to put a link in the show notes below to a recent update interview in which CEO Craig Lindsay talked about this positive development and how the company will progress forward. In addition to hearing about the positive qualities of Idaho as a mining jurisdiction in today's show, make sure you go to otisgold.com to learn more about Otis Gold Corp. Now let's go to our interview. And I am in Vancouver, and I just finished a breakfast called Focus on Gold in Idaho. And obviously, as the title indicates, it was focused on why you would invest in gold miners in Idaho, what's going on. One of the speakers was Mr. Ben Davenport. He's from the Idaho Mining Association, and he joins me today. Ben, thanks for coming on Mining Stock Education to talk about what the good things that are going on in Idaho.
Thanks for having me, Bill.
All right, could you give my listeners just a quick thumbnail overview of the last 30 years of the general mining cycle in Idaho?
Yeah, it's been kind of an up and down cycle, as you might expect. In the mid to late 90s, gold saw quite a dip in price, and we saw significant contraction of the industry in Idaho. We saw our major gold producer close, a couple of them close at that time, and since then we haven't seen much going on in the state. It's been nice seeing the resurgence in the last couple of years as gold prices have climbed, and as some of these companies have looked for safer jurisdictions. We found a lot of success in promoting Idaho to some of these projects.
What about the friendliness of the government towards the mining industry? What can you speak about what's occurred in the last 3 decades?
Yeah, I don't think that anything has changed with our government in the last 3 decades when it comes to the mining industry specifically. Idaho has always been a responsibly regulated state. Our legislature and our leadership in the governor's administration has always tried to make things easy for business while it's responsible regulation. I think they try to work to getting to yes for some of these projects. So I don't think that's necessarily changed over the last 30 years, but as some of the mining projects continue to come into the state of Idaho, you start seeing some of our government officials be more familiar with regulating mines, and so it makes the process a little bit easier going forward and trying to get some of these projects permitted.
I was impressed. One of the companies, Integra Resources, talked about how some of your state officials went with them when they were talking to potential financing sources. Can you talk about that, and what other ways is the government of Idaho helping the gold miners?
Yeah, the Idaho Mining Association's worked really hard over the last couple of years to try and put together this investor coalition to try and get some of our government officials in front of the investor world. And so a couple of years ago, we had the governor of the state and some of his administrative folks from different departments that deal with permitting with us in Toronto, and then again in New York. So Yeah, the reception has been very good when it comes to getting government to help us with what we're looking for in Idaho.
One of the things that was talked about was the Geological endowment of Idaho, which is great, and how when you compare that to Nevada, which has seen a lot of exploration and mining dollars go into it, the potential is great. Can you talk a little bit about the comparison between the potential in Idaho relative to Nevada?
Yeah, I'm not a geologist, Bill, so I'm going to put that out there at the first onset there. But geology does not know man-made borders, of course, and so northern Nevada is still the same basin as southern Idaho there, and so we have a lot of the same geological trends that Nevada has. Similarly, when you look at Idaho's geology, you can draw lines from British Columbia and the Yukon down into Idaho as well, and we have very similar geology along that whole line there. I think there is a lot of potential.
What about permitting? How does the permitting structure of Idaho compare to Nevada?
Well, I've never tried to permit a project ever myself, so I can't tell you what it's like in Nevada. I can tell you that permitting a project on state land in Idaho would be very, very favorably met. The challenge that we have in Idaho, like every other state, is the large federal ownership in land distribution. We've got about 60% of our state owned by the federal government. And sometimes it takes a little bit longer to permit projects on Forest Service or BLM. In Nevada, they do have a lot of BLM land holdings, which seem to be more versed at permitting mines than some of the Forest Service folks. That doesn't mean that we won't get there once we get some of these projects permitted, but certainly the BLM is more familiar with permitting a mine right now. So there are some challenges there with educating the Forest Service, but I think we're getting there.
What's the role of mining in contributing to the GDP of the state?
Yeah, so currently mining is only about 1.5% of the state GDP, and that includes mining as well as the ancillary companies or contractors that work for industry as well. And so, $1 billion in a $65 billion economy doesn't seem like a lot, but it means a lot to our local and rural communities in Idaho. So I think a 1.5%, somewhere near $1 billion a year, may seem small, but that just shows what kind of growth can happen if we have if we get one or two of these projects off the ground. I mean, right now we've only got 5 larger operating mines in the state, and one more can put us up to 2% of the GDP, and then we can just see growth from there.
What is the local population, their perspective and the sentiment towards mining, and has that improved recently?
Yeah, I don't know if it's improved. I can't say whether or not it's improved. Obviously, there's a lot of anecdotal stories when it comes to mining and the public's perception of mining. If you're in a community where mining is happening and it's active in your community, it's usually very good, and they appreciate the economic benefits, they appreciate the jobs, they appreciate the contributions that are made in the schools and in the local communities. And then when you start getting closer to the urban centers, like anywhere, they may have a different opinion of what mining is. So statewide, it's still pretty favorable for natural resources in Idaho. But we've got a lot of work to do at the Idaho Mining Association to make sure that we continue to tell that story, and so that people understand where their products come from and how mining can be done responsibly and sustainably, and not damage the local communities.
What's the state of Idaho's relationship with the federal government, and what changes have you seen since the Trump administration took office?
I'll tell you, Idaho's very independent in our thinking politically. In the past, we have not seen eye to eye with the federal government on a lot of things. That trend doesn't necessarily it's been better recently. The Trump administration has been very interested in streamlining regulations and trying to make things easier for business. So I think our government, who also supports a more streamlined approach to policy and rules, has been very receptive to some of the Trump administration ideas. So that's not to say that we're not a republic still, but I think our leadership in Idaho has been receptive to the Trump administration's ideas.
So you talk to the government, you talk to the miners. When you're talking to the mining companies, what are your suggestions you give them with how they deal with the locals and deal with the government?
Yeah, my suggestions are always to be open and honest. Transparency is the name of the game in Idaho. We heard today from some of these folks that the accessibility to government is one of the big things that we have in Idaho that some other jurisdictions might not have. But if we aren't continuing to be trustworthy and open and honest with how our dealings, then that accessibility will go away. So we need to continue to do the right thing and continue to keep our government informed and keep our locals informed on what we're trying to do.
As we conclude, any final thoughts you'd like to share with the investors listening to you? And do you have a website they could look at?
Yeah, we certainly have a website. It's MiningIdaho.com. The only thing I can say is that I think the secret's out on Idaho, not just in the beauty of the state, not just in the resource of the state, but how government operates in the state of Idaho. We are now, according to our governor, the least regulated state in the nation. And he's got plenty of stats to share with you on that. So if you guys ever need any of those, just reach out and I'll get you in touch with the governor and he can tell you all about Idaho.
Excellent. You've been hearing today from Mr. Ben Davenport from the Idaho Mining Association. Ben, thanks for coming on Mining Stock Education and sharing your insights.
Hey, appreciate it.